Welcome to Open Up Dad, a show where we talk honestly and openly about the highs and lows of parenting. From a new parent who's still figuring it out, we are part of the Open Up Healing channel where we believe in the importance of opening up. And today, I'm very excited. My guest is Clark Hsiao. Clark and I have known each other for 10 years, and he's always just been a person that's really full of light. And his parenting journey, I find really interesting because it is incredibly unique. It's also really unique to this show. And I'm really excited to talk to him about it. Clark, welcome to Open Up Dad, man. We did it. We finally got together.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I obviously know you very well. We've been kind of all over the country together for work, actually, which is pretty funny. But for
Yep.
those that don't know you, can you give us an introduction to who you are, what you do, etc.?
So my name is Clark Hsiao. I am a photographer. I work with my partner, Jessica Hay, and we shoot portraits, lifestyle-based imagery for advertising and editorial. And that's how I became a dad. But I'm a stepdad. I met our daughter when she was maybe 4 years old.
Right.
And it's been a great, fulfilling, and kind of a wild journey.
Right. So that's kind of my first question. So you met your daughter when she was 4. How old were you at that time?
I was 22.
Okay, so this is what I find fascinating. So you're
Mhm.
this 22-year-old guy. I'm assuming you just left art school because you went to art school, right?
I did, but I had gone to college beforehand. So I'd gone to college, I graduated the whole thing, and I graduated in the fall of, or in the summer of 2001.
Okay.
And then 9/11 happened.
Oh man.
Yeah. So then luckily I had a job then that fall. But as the year kind of progressed, the company that I was at, it was an animation studio, they ended up laying off a third of the company.
Oh wow.
And so I ended up, I was at a point where it's like, it felt like it was hard to get another job or find a job that, that I was really into. And so I was fortunate enough that I had the opportunity to go back to school. And I went to Art Center in Pasadena. And I was 22. It was kind of a great experience, like a great time to figure out sort of what it really opened up my perspective to a lot more than, because I went to a standard, big university the first time,
Right.
and I had not taken advantage of it. I had really wasted my time in college because I thought I was just going to graduate and then move out of the country and go work somewhere,
Right.
Doing something else. And so I never really took it that seriously. And so when I actually got an opportunity to go to art school, I was like, okay, this is actually great. Like I was a lot more committed to it.
Right.
And so the first day of orientation, I met Jessica. But at that point, it was just like, you sit around in a circle. Hi, my name is Clark Hsiao.
Right.
I'm from Arcadia, California, right? And we just became friends. We were just friends for the whole time. Jessica had mentioned that she, has a young child. She moved down from the Bay Area. And so I was just curious, about a lot of my classmates.
Right.
Because it was really, really pretty a mixed bag of young people, young and moderately young people.
Right.
And so, Jessica occasionally would bring Bella to school, to class. And so we would just see this little munchkin kind of hanging out, and she was terribly shy. And then we became friends. And it was only towards the very end of our time at Art Center that, you know, Jessica and I became like partners.
Right. So that's one, my first instinct is to like give you a hug because it's very rare. I find that you meet a guy like, and I don't mean to generalize, but truly a guy who is willing to be a figure in a kid's life, especially if it's not his, air quote biological child. But here you are, you're 22 years old. Most 22-year-olds are like partying and freaking out. The last thing they even want to think about is like the responsibility of a child, let alone someone they're dating's child. So how did you like, were there moments in that when you made the decision like, hey, I really want to be with this person, I really like, I feel this connection and she has this baby, like, like what does your family say, like what does your friends say, because I'm sure they said something.
So yeah, so I think in the kind of the 3-4 years of of getting to know Jessica and Bella and Jessica's ex-husband, I understood that they ultimately had the key ingredient to make this a very kind of smooth relationship, as smooth as these relationships can go, is that Jessica and her ex-husband decided together that whatever decisions they made in their personal lives as adults, the overriding determining factor was, is this going to be in the best interest of Bella? Right. So so I was seeing this, I was like, oh, so they're not, it didn't seem like it was a really, at least to me at the time, of a rough relationship that she had with her ex-husband. And they understood that, like, okay, if I'm going to take this job somewhere else, how is that going to benefit our child?
Right.
So that's number one. So I was like, okay, so they figured that part out, which, looking back and even in these last, 15 years, you see that that is definitely not the case, where the two separate, the mom and the dad are really just like, they are not into each other. They are just willing to do anything just to kind of wreck the other person's life.
Yeah, I mean, it's very rare to see a copacetic relationship like that.
Yeah.
At least in my experience.
Yeah. And so that was number one. Number two, yeah, my mom was a little bit like, and it's like, so my mom is, she's like a Chinese lady. She's got her mahjong friends, right? And they're just like, what, and they would play mahjong, and my mom would tell me, she's like, yeah, so, my friends are asking, oh, what do you think about your son, being with this woman that is, a little bit, she's a little bit older, has a child. And credit to my mom, she answered it, I think she's come to terms with the fact that she's like, hey, listen, as long as our children, as long as I was happy and healthy, I mean, that's all I can ask for.
Right.
Which is also, I feel like, kind of rare. Because I know a lot of Asian aunts and moms that are just like, you hear them talk about their kids and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that, that's not my relationship with my mom.
Right.
Yeah. And then, I wasn't with Jessica until I was, 25, 26. And in that time, I think I had done enough of the fun stuff, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, this is pretty great. Like, you see this. So, I've seen her grow up basically since she was 4 years old. And I was like, man, this is a kind of a neat little person.
Yeah.
And, and it wasn't smooth all the way. I think there was a moment when she was about 8 years old. Yeah. So like 4 years, she was like 8, 9 years old. And, in the beginning, we made it, as the adults, we made a very conscious effort to sort of, I would leave, I would be over at the house, I would have dinner, we'd watch movies, this and that. And then I would leave, or, I would leave before Bella woke up. Because Bella used to do this thing when she was a kid. She had her own room. And so she would get up in the morning and then she would come into Jessica's room and then get into the bed in the morning, like a cuddle, right?
Right.
So we made it a conscious decision that like, okay, I'm not going to be in here when she comes in the morning.
Wow.
Right. So it was like, so I would leave at like, whatever, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning. Right. And then one night we're just like, okay, let's just see what happens.
Okay.
And so she comes in, she opens the door, and she just kind of stands there, and you can see like the wheels are turning, and she's like doing the math, right? She's like, fuck it, this is my mom. I'm getting in that bed.
Yeah.
Right. So she gets in, and she gets in on the other side because where Jessica is.
Yeah.
And there was a period of, I want to say around 5 or 6 months where she was not having it. Like, I think she figured out, she was like, oh, my mom gives me, 10 hugs and 10 kisses a day, right? Let's just say. And she's like seeing, she's like, oh, mommy's giving Clark kisses and Clark hugs, right? Those are for me, right?
Right.
So I am getting shafted. Like Bella's probably thinking like, this is terrible. Like I'm getting shafted, right? I'm getting cheated out of my experience with my mom. And it was like, she wouldn't listen. She was really we found really fantastically funny little like journal entries, like little sketches from like essentially 8 or 9-year-olds, where there's stick figure drawings of her, and they had a cat named Tony, and I was allergic to Tony. And the drawing is her throwing Tony at my head.
Oh my God.
To give me allergies or whatever.
That's amazing.
But then, yeah, it was a really strange and kind of difficult time. But then literally one day she woke up and it was just like the switch was turned off.
Right.
And then everything was fine.
Right.
And then literally from that point on, it's been great.
Right. So why I find this so interesting is, and to be very honest with you, is I had like somewhat of a stepdad for about 2 years of my life, from 6 years old to 8 years old. And he was incredibly abusive to my mom, to me. And he kind of entered my life, and it was almost as if he told me like, hey, I'm going to be the dad now. And, similar to Bella, when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, it's like you're able to do that math. And I, being the person I guess I've always been, was just like, no, you don't get to just like be my dad. And you know what I'm saying? Like, by him entering my life that way, I couldn't find the respect for him. And I remember this one time I asked him, I was like, can I call you dad? Because I was going through this time of my life where I was really realizing that I didn't have a father. I didn't know him. And, all the kids at school had one and whatever else. And he said yes. And very shortly after that is when we had to like, honestly, like flee the situation because it got so bad. So it almost solidified my, distaste and full on like distrust in men. Because here's this person that I'm just asked to be something that I don't know anything about. And then he like totally broke it, while also like entering my life with this like aggression. So what I always found interesting about your situation, and you just also like reiterated this, is you guys have this like amazing just like understanding. And I know I've seen like bits and bobs of you and Bella. I know Bella's like a full-on adult now and like out of the house, but you guys have this like love for each other, and that's like the biggest thing that I find with these situations is it's so rare to hear about your situation. Like usually stepdads, it's like, oh, my fucking stepdad, or oh, my fucking stepmom, or whatever. But it's almost as if, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bella truly feels like she has 3 parents.
Yeah.
And just how did you guys do that? Because it's just so outlandish to me, because my situation was like I still have trauma because of this guy. Like if I saw him, I it would take a lot for me to not like get violent. Let's put it that way. And I'm not
Okay.
that person anymore, but
Yeah.
that's like my initial reaction.
I think you brought up a really good point. In the very get-go, because I met Jessica and her ex-husband, I had a lot of respect for him. I still do have a lot of respect for him.
Right.
He, at no point in that, even to this day, do I feel like I am like her father. Right. She has a dad, right? So I never had the inclination to feel like I was going to be her dad.
Right.
I did really want to be an adult figure in her life.
Right.
And so I took that kind of, I took it very seriously. I was really nervous because one day I had this habit of brushing my teeth at the end of the night in front of the TV. So I would brush my teeth for like 5-10 minutes, just like watching, whatever, ESPN or whatever, right? And this is around the same time, she was around 9 years old, I think, 9 years old. And I'm sitting there brushing my teeth, and she came with her toothbrush, and she sat down, and she started brushing her teeth. And I was like, whoa, we've never talked about this. Like none of, like, there was no, we never talked about this. And except, but then she just copied it. And at that point I was like, here's something really scary. You can tell kids the sky is, green, the sky is green, the sky is green, the sky is green. And then you turn around and you make a painting that the sky is, purple or whatever. They're going to be like, oh, the sky's purple. Right. It's all just like, that's what I just said doesn't make any sense.
It does.
But they are amazing at observing and mimicking your actions. It's so much more about, they're going to do as you do and not as you say.
Right. And that's the thing about, again, I don't mean to just like keep applauding you, but for a person to walk into a child's life and fully understand the responsibility that is, because like you just said, children are so malleable. Like I even see it with my daughter Maxime. She's 10 months old and she does things because I do them. She does things because her mom does them. Like she already has like these little habits and little things that are her own, and she's 10 months old. So the responsibility that you took on at like such an early age. I know you're like, yeah, I was 25. It's like, no, dude, like 25 is still like really young. Like when I was 25, I was still fully like a crazy person, right? And I just think that's really amazing because the other side of that is I am also a dad. My daughter is biologically my daughter. And I've thought about this sometimes. I've thought about like, okay, what if it doesn't work out with Juliet and I romantically? What if it doesn't? And what would I do if she met someone else that she truly loves, that she wants her in her life? Like, what would I do if Maxime ended up living with Juliet and some other guy half of her life? I think about it. And honestly, my first reaction is not good. It's not. Because of that fact, though, that like what you just said, I think is such an amazing moment. Like you guys brushing your teeth in front of the TV together. But like as a dad, I'm like, I don't want my kid doing that with someone else. No way.
Right.
But that's also an issue, isn't it? Because I think kids who come from, I hate this term, but they say like broken homes, divorce, you don't have a parent, whatever it might be. There's such a void in their, let's just call it like their spirit, because eventually, because they are so smart, because people don't give kids like that credit. They're so smart. They feel this void. And like, I think it's kind of amazing that in a lot of ways, like you filled that. And have you and her dad, Jessica's ex-husband, have you guys discussed this at length? Like, how was that initial like, what did he say to you? Like, how was that for you? How was that for him? I mean, for me, if I was you, I would have been scared shitless. But also, if I was him, I would have been trying to be intimidating, right?
Right. I can't remember if we actually ever had a conversation about it. I think, I imagine Jessica probably talked with her ex-husband about me to a certain extent. And maybe, it's like, oh, don't worry, Clark's super harmless, right? Like
Right.
he's not a creep, he's not mean, he's not abusive. And I think I saw my sort of relationship in their family, like, hey, I am legitimately the outsider. These
Right.
are three people that have this relationship, this bond already. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna try to go in there and fucking, and like, you know, flip it, flip the tables on them. You know what I mean? I'm going to be as sort of accommodating as possible, and ultimately Bella is their child.
Right.
Right. They set the rules of, how the time, spent vice versa, with the mom and the dad. And so I think I really, and I was just really respectful of Jessica's ex-husband. Like he's a great guy.
Yeah.
It's like Jessica and his relationship was what kind of deteriorated, and it didn't really have anything to do with me. And their love for Bella, is still like she's their daughter.
Yeah.
And now, Bella has, Jessica's ex-husband is remarried, has two young boys of his own with his wife. So, it's interesting to me that the idea of the broken family, to me, I look at this, and I know it's probably it's not that common. I feel like Bella's experience has actually gotten very, very full.
Right.
Because it's like, oh, all of a sudden you have more parents. You're just exposed to so much more stuff. And we're lucky. Like Bella's a great kid, because I can see how some kids could, Bella had the same like 6-month period with her dad when she found out that he had a girlfriend. Right. And then when Bella found out that, like, oh, Bella, you're gonna have a baby brother, she was not having it.
Really?
For that little bit of time, right? It's like, and then again, it's just like, then one day she woke up and everything was fine.
Right. And this is also what interests me. So obviously Bella has her relationship with her mom. She has her relationship with her dad. But what is your guys' relationship? Because I know just from knowing you for a long time, but you guys are really close. So have you found, walk me through the last 15 years a bit, because I think it was really amazing, the brushing your teeth moment, but how has that like transpired into her now being an adult? Like, are there times where she's like, I'm only talking to Clark, like I don't want to talk to you guys, you know what I mean?
I feel like that had happened. So so the brushing the teeth was elementary school, and then in middle school we moved to Highland Park, where we're at now, and she went to a small private school in Los Feliz for middle school. And I found that time to be fantastic in that I would drive her to school.
Right.
Or pick her up. And it's those windows of that half hour where it's like kind of a captive audience, right?
Yeah.
And you can just sort of talk to them and listen to them and hear what they're thinking about things and things that are happening in their lives. So those were our moments, like in middle school. And then in high school, what we ended up doing a bunch was I would have like ice cream and boba nights. So after dinner, Belle and I and Jessica would be at home. Bella and I would just go out and we'd go and try to find like our new favorite soft serve place, or we'd go to a different boba spot and grab boba drinks. And it was just sort of, hanging out and like talking and shooting the shit. And it was a lot of me kind of, knowing that I'm not her dad and not trying to be her dad. I'm just trying to be someone that she can talk to, that will listen to her. And yeah, and I think it made it easier for me because it's like, I'm not trying to be her dad. And I just I'm trying to be supportive of her, and giving her someone to talk to that wasn't her actual parent.
Right.
Was probably helpful. And then, and ultimately it's crazy because so by her senior year in high school, she was getting ready to go to school, go to college, go away. And I was going through the archive and just kind of, organizing images. And I got really sad. I got really bummed.
Yeah.
And she, I was super bummed. I was like, just when you're getting like really kind of fleshed out as your own person, right? You have your own ideas, you got your own way of thinking about things, of talking about things. Just when you're getting super interesting, you're gonna leave.
Right.
Right. And I was really, really bummed. And then she said to me, she's like, and I'm paraphrasing. She's like, we're gonna get old. We're gonna grow up together. It's not like I am gonna stay this 18-year-old person, or that you're gonna stay and then you're gonna get old, or vice versa. Like we're all gonna grow old, together. Like this is happening. And I was like, oh wow, that's true. I mean, I was, I was just like really sad. And it was really kind of reassuring. Like, hey, we're like, I'm not leaving you behind. We're not, severing some crazy tie. Like this is just, we're in this together.
Wow.
And I thought that was great.
She sounds like a super cool kid.
She is. I think the thing that we're really lucky is she is very empathetic.
Yeah.
Like super empathetic, and just a very kind person.
That's amazing.
Which I mean, it's weird. I never really considered that in people that I knew. It's like your friends, like, oh, you just want them to be fun, or like hardworking, or smart, or there's the, the goofy one, or there's the one that parties really hard, or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's like, oh wow, like the kindness and the empathy is huge.
Yeah. The one thing I just want to go back a little bit. What you just said, it honestly, it kind of makes me tear up, because I feel personally incredibly lucky, and I'm incredibly grateful, because I had a couple mentors growing up. I had a big brother through the Big Brother program, and then I also had another big brother that was like my neighbor, and to this day, like, I call them my brothers. And I truly think that if it wasn't for them, my life would have been a lot different, because I had these guys who were older than me, who weren't from Hollywood, they weren't from LA, they didn't go to Fairfax, like they didn't exist in the world that I existed in, and they were really adamant about showing me the world, whether it was like taking me surfing, or bringing me to New York, or like doing things to just get me out of the neighborhood, and get me out of the influence of the kids I was around. And I seriously, now that I'm a dad, and I'm 31 years old, and I can look back, I just like, wow, if I didn't have that, I don't know where I'd be, because a lot of those kids I grew up with, they're nowhere, and they didn't have that. And I think you should really go to sleep at night sometimes. And I know it's probably like hard for you, because you are such a nice guy, but like, give yourself some credit, because that goes a long way for kids, especially kids who have maybe a confusing home. Let's call it a confusing home. Maybe, kids that don't have that nuclear family, like, man, even getting picked up from school. Like, I remember just when anyone would pick me up from school, I was just so happy. because I didn't have to like take the bus. I didn't have to walk home. Like I didn't have to deal with like maybe running into people that aren't, it's not going to be a good time. You know, like that safety, it was just like, it felt so safe to just get like picked up from school. And you gave that to a kid and you didn't have to. And I think that's really amazing. And I just wanted to say that.
Thanks. There was a funny story about picking Bella up from middle school. So man, that was middle school is, about 10 years ago, right?
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I wear a lot of baseball caps. I was wearing like Jordans and shorts, just regular big T-shirt or whatever. And I picked her up from school, and I parked the car and I walked across the field, and I see her standing there talking to one of the teachers, and they just both start cracking up. So I was like, okay. I'm like, hey, hi, Mrs. What, I don't remember the teacher's name. Mm-hmm. And so we start walking to the car, and I asked Bella, I was like, what are you guys laughing about? And she was like, oh, my teacher asked if you were my brother coming to pick me up. And I was like, oh man, yeah, that's pretty funny. And it's sort of like knowing those, like hearing that and experiencing those sort of things also puts you in sort of like a place where like, okay, you don't, I mean, this is me talking to me, like you don't have to take it so seriously because other people aren't expecting you to be this like big grand character in her life, right? Like, and so I think because I didn't put this like, oh my God, I have to be this like kind of perfect adult figure in her life. Like I'm really goofy. I think it takes the levity, it lifts it a little bit. It makes it a little bit more fun. And I think maybe with that, she saw that she could be a little bit more open and sharing because it wasn't like I was going to be angry or punish her or, I was going to take it with just the same sort of lightness.
That's amazing. The other thing I've been quite curious about, because you have like a 2-factor uniqueness to your whole situation. The other thing is you work with your wife and you have for years.
Yeah.
You guys, okay, so you have a kid, you work together, you own a home together, you also have a dog. And I always throw in the dog because dogs are a lot of work too. And people need to realize this. So now though, you guys, okay, we have all this stuff. It's been 15 plus years. Okay, that's good. Now Bella's leaving. She's going to college. She's becoming an adult. You just said you were bummed, but also, it's not just about you. It's about her mom too.
Yeah.
So now also, you guys are empty nesters. So how has that kind of shifted your marriage? Because now all of a sudden you don't have little kid at home. You don't have, whatever it was, bath time or boba night or whatever. Like, and then also, let's not forget, you guys kind of went through this, and then there was also the pandemic. So you're going through empty nesting, being stuck at home. I'm sure like work stuff got weird. There's a lot of newness in your situation right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but how has that been for you guys just as partners?
So the pandemic, I think we, relationship-wise, we are very fortunate because we do and we have spent all of our time together for 15 years.
Yeah.
Right? So all of this like at home together time with Jessica and I, it's just sort of like this is just our life.
Yes, day to day.
That 100% saved us from all of the other things that you hear. I'm sure, we've had friends that had splits, this and that. Because it's like, oh, we already know how you spend 5 hours of your day doing God knows what. Or this is what she's probably thinking about me, right?
Yeah.
like I already know how you waste 5 hours of your day. It's not going to bother me, right? Anymore. And so that has definitely helped us through this pandemic time. But the empty nester thing, it's wild. Like I remember when she had first left, we were still doing things. Whereas I feel like the idea of an empty nester generally is for parents that are older, and they're kind of like, I don't, yeah. It's like we can still do a bunch of the stuff that we literally did when we were in our 20s and 30s.
Right.
Whether or not we wanted to, that's a whole separate story, right? But it's like we can. Whereas, if you're 65 if you're 65 and you're an empty nester, I don't really know if you want to do stuff that you did when you were 30, 35 years old.
Sure.
Maybe. Yeah. And so we enjoyed it a little while, and then we're like, oh, okay, this is cool. Like, dinners could be sort of at whenever we want now. Like if we wanted to eat at 5, we could eat at 5. If we want to eat at 9, we could eat at 9.
Yeah.
Right. Like those little things.
That's cool. I mean, that's such a cool perspective.
Yeah, it's fun, but it's also really great to have, to have her come home every so often, or we go out there and visit, and and seeing how she has changed, even just from like summer to summer, is wild as well. And as much as we're talking about our impact on on the child, on Bella, or your impact on your child, I think it's equally impactful, like their change for us, like how we change. Like I know that my life is way more fulfilled and way more meaningful just having her in my life. Wow. Right? Her and her mom. Yeah. There's no doubt that their impact on me is greater than my impact on them.
So the other thing that I see almost myself in you, like you being further along in it than I am, but how old are you, Clark, if you don't mind me asking?
I am 42.
Okay, so you're 42. Okay, this is great. So you're kind of still at that age where a lot of your friends are probably like just having kids, or like their kids are like 5, let's say. So you're kind of like in a weird age group because you're like already done. Like you're like, oh, like my kid's out of the house. Like I'm having fun with my wife. Like I'm, doing whatever 5 hours a day. Like,
right.
So how is that? Because it's not like, I hate to use the word weird, but it's kind of like interesting because it's like usually where when like people get to like where you're at, they're like almost going to be like grandparents or something, but you're super young. You're 42 years old. And I know Jessica isn't like crazy old either. Like not that she's old at all, but I know you said she's older.
She's a few years older.
But like you guys are like pretty young, and especially in Los Angeles, like a lot of what Juliet and I get is like, oh my God, you guys are such young parents. And I'm like, dude, I'm 31. Like that's not like that young. But in LA, in the society that we live in, that's super young. Like most people here don't have kids at all, or they have kids at like 42 or 40. And so what's that like with like your buddies or something when you're like, oh dude, like Bella's like, I don't know, she just sent me a photo of like something at school. Like how's little one?
So I have, because I went to college twice and I didn't really do a whole lot of moving around. I have friends from childhood, from elementary school, middle school, high school, college, first time, that are still around. They're the ones that have gotten married. They're the ones with the 5-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old.
Yeah.
And those friends of mine, they all kind of got married and had kids around the same, like plus or minus 3 years.
Yeah.
I realized I don't see them as much. It's like when they get together, it's literally like a bunch of little kids running around. Yeah. Right. In the beginning, it was great. Like when they were like little, because it's not as much of like a madhouse. Right. And then now I rarely see them, so we'll text and have phone calls and things like that. And then the art school friends, that there's still a group of friends that are, not married and are still single. And there are other half of those art school friends that have also very recently had kids. So they have like 1, 2, 3-year olds.
Right, like babies.
And I'm all, yeah. And I'm also seeing that they are also spending a lot of time together, just like my buddies were when they, had kids. And so it's weird because you start seeing like, you start seeing the time spent with your friends start to get a little bit, the gaps get wider and wider.
Well, you're also kind of in the middle of this now because you you don't have a baby, you don't have a little kid, you have a big kid. So it's like you're like, hey, I have like all the time in the world.
Totally.
Like I can do whatever the hell I want.
Yeah. Totally.
That's interesting. I think it's cool though that you guys are all still friends because again, I feel like I'm the sad boy of this conversation, which is fine. But for me, it's really weird because I am in a place where I'm at an age where either people are starting to kind of establish their career or wanting to. I'm also in a place where like the only places I've lived are LA and New York, where, having a family is like usually not a priority for most people because they're hard places to live and you need to make money and you need to hustle, hustle, hustle. I'm also part of a generation, unfortunately, that is like, in my experience, what I've seen is like kind of terrified of commitment. So, I'm a weirdo. It's like I'm married. My wife is 27 years old. Like we have a 10-month-old baby. Like I live in like a cool place. Like I don't leave the house much. I have a fucking podcast. Like I'm in like my own little insular world, and I've found that there's days where I'm really sad because I'm just like, man, I don't really have any friends anymore. Now, some of those friends are good that I don't have, but kind of weird because I'm starting to make friends with kids, which is really nice. But like you just said, it's not really like, bro, what's going on? It's more just like, oh, did you hear what Maxime did? Like it's just about our kids, which is great. But there's it was a struggle for me to find camaraderie for most of the pregnancy and Maxime's life. And then also to what you said, it's like we were doing this through a pandemic and we're not people that like sit at home all day. Like that's not our natural kind of state. I've really become that and have like really enjoyed becoming that person, but it's just been really weird, like not seeing our friends and then also kind of like losing my friends. So I love hearing your perspective where you're just like, yeah, there's like gaps in how we talk, but we're still friends. Like it gives me hope.
Yeah, I think it totally is. I think the relationships that I have with the friends that I've made through these years is we can not talk for a while and just kind of pick up, which I think is very fortunate. And then and like relationships in general, like some will just kind of fall off a little bit, and that'll run its like relationship. Some relationships run its course like that, right?
Yeah.
And that's totally normal.
Yeah.
But finding a not a support group, but finding friends that are in a similar situation, I think that will be really helpful. Just
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
And yeah, like most of my friends when I first, we first got together, and they heard about Bella and this and that, they were just like, their minds were kind of like blown away. It was just like, whoa, this is wild.
Right.
And I was like, yeah, but it's really nice. It's really fun, and it's like they're great people. Yeah.
God, man, you're a lucky guy. I'm like so inspired by your life.
I am really lucky, for sure. I live a charmed life.
But you deserve it. The last question I have, and I try to end all of these with this, and I think asking you this is just kind of fun for me. But did you always want to be a dad? Did you think you'd be a dad?
No. Maybe I should have mentioned this earlier. I grew up, so my parents were technically married, but I never really lived with my dad. He always worked elsewhere.
Oh, wow.
So I only lived with him that I can remember like in first grade when
Oh, whoa.
so like right before we moved to California from Taiwan, my mom, my sister, and I was 5 years old. So we moved to California. She found a place. We moved in, and then my dad came and like lived with us for a year to work a job, and then that didn't pan out. So then he went back to Asia,
Oh, whoa.
and so I saw things, or like I understood how certain relationships went, and I sort of understood how things that I wanted to do and things that I didn't want to do. And I didn't learn those things until I was maybe, you know, around 18, 19, when I started visiting my dad in Asia.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, all of these things, it was exactly one of those things where he would come. So we would see him about 3 to 4 times a year,
Right.
growing up for 2 weeks at a time.
Holidays, etc.
Yep. And he would, very much like bring his work home. It was, high stress, and he was very much kind of like a little dictator. And we would all be really scared, oh, dad's coming home for 2 weeks. Oh my God, we got to like clean the house up and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I was 18, I went to go visit him, and I was like, oh, you used to tell us all these things, but then you do this other thing.
Right.
And I was like, oh, I don't have to take what you say so seriously anymore.
Yeah. You realize your parents are human beings.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's, yeah. And so so growing up, I never wanted to be I never thought about being a parent, because I was like, man, it's scary and it's rough. And I think the thing that I think about a lot is like, children don't choose to be children. Like, they don't choose to be, it's like we as a parent choose to be parents. So I think it's a responsibility that is entirely sort of like on our shoulders.
Yeah, well, I mean, for someone who didn't want that or think it would happen to them, I think you definitely hit a home run, man.
Thank you.
All right, Clark, it was such a pleasure, man. Thank you so much for being on the show. Like, seriously, this was amazing.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I hope to see you soon, because like what we just talked about, you and I need to start hanging out more.
Sounds good. Will do. Let's do it.
All right, man. Have a good one.
Yep. Take care.